There is a city in America where the highway floats across the lake. On top of that, the social culture is so famously cold it has its own name. And with all the weirdness, it's only expected that the housing market does the opposite of the rest of the country in pretty much every direction. That city is Seattle, and today I'm breaking down why it's the opposite of a typical city. But I can say right away, I've lived here 35 years. Wow, that does sound like a lot, but I absolutely love it. And we've helped almost 900 families buy or sell a home, and most of them love it too. All right, if you pull up a satellite map of Atlanta, you'll see a city spreading out like spilled coffee, going in every direction at once. Now pull up Seattle. It looks like the powers that be have the mission of creating the most compact city ever. The whole place looks like it's under a vice grip. And why is that? Well, you've got Puget Sound on the west, Lake Washington on the east, and a strip of land in between that is super narrow. At the tightest point, it's less than 3 miles across. That's it. So what does that mean? Other than bragging rights when you tell other people you crossed a whole major city on foot in just an hour, the city just couldn't grow outward like a normal city. Had to grow in a line north and south instead of every direction. That means that every freeway, every major road, every neighborhood is funneled through that same strip. I-5 is the spine of this whole thing, and there isn't a backup option when something goes wrong on it. That's why traffic feels worse here than it should for a city this size, because there's nowhere else for the cars to go. Now, even inside that strip, things get harder. Seattle was built on what locals call the Seven Hills, kind of like Rome. It's weird how this place is compared to the rest of the country. We had to go all the way to Italy to find something comparable. You've got Capitol Hill, Queen Anne, Beacon Hill, First Hill, Magnolia. All these big steep hills, they were carved out by a glacier about 14,000 years ago, and they're so steep that from 1890 to 1940, the city literally took mountains apart. They flattened Denny Hill, dug canals to connect Puget Sound to Lake Washington, and people moved earth on a scale most cities never even considered just to make the place buildable. There's something over here that messes with people. With all that water around you, you'd think it would feel claustrophobic, but people here love it. You can see Puget Sound from Pike Place Market. Almost anywhere you're walking around, there's a lake or a bay or a canal everywhere you turn. So it can be a great thing if you like those views. There is a flip side, I'm not going to skip it. Seattle sits on the Cascadia subduction zone, one of the most active seismic systems in the world. A big one is coming eventually, and our building codes reflect that. So it's not going to be a surprise when it comes. But on top of that, the landslide risk is real too, especially on those steep hillsides I just talked about. And then there's wildfire smoke, which used to be a once in a while thing, but not anymore. Seattle-Tacoma now ranks 8th worst in the country for daily particle pollution. So geography sets the stage for everything in Seattle, but once you accept that the city can't grow outward, the next question gets interesting. How do you connect a place like this to everything around it? The answer is wild. It's called floating bridges and ferries. Really though, how do you build a highway across a lake that's way too deep to put pillars in? Lake Washington is deep, and the lake bed is too soft for traditional bridge foundations. Engineers had to come up with something else, and what they built is one of the most unusual things you'll ever see. The State Route 520 bridge connecting Seattle to the east side is the longest floating bridge on Earth, running almost 1.5 miles, and it floats on giant concrete pontoons. So you might be imagining something straight out of the show Wipeout, but the structure of this bridge is awesome. And it's not even the only one, because you've also got the I-90 floating bridge. This is where Seattle gets even weirder. As of March 2026, Sound Transit's 2-line officially opened across that bridge, connecting downtown Redmond, Bellevue, and Seattle all the way through with light rail. It's the first time a major American light rail system runs across a floating bridge. What other city in America would pull something like this? That's just Seattle. It's what we have to do to adapt to its geography. That's just the bridges. There's also the ferry system. Another little known fact probably, Washington State Ferries is the largest ferry system in the United States. In 2025, it carried 20.1 million passengers. That's the first time the system has crossed 20 million riders since 2019. The pandemic, of course, put a brake on it. But there's something locals know that newcomers don't. For thousands of people commuting from Bainbridge, Kitsap, and Vashon Island, the ferry is their version of a bus or a train. They take it every day because there's no other way unless you're a good swimmer. Miss the boat, you wait 35-40 minutes for the next one. There's no detour, no alternate route. So let's talk about what all this infrastructure has created on the other side. You've got the east side, and that means Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, Sammamish. You should know that the east side feels nothing like Seattle. Bellevue's most walkable neighborhood that isn't downtown Bellevue is called Crossroads, and it is barely walkable at all. And it's downhill from there for most areas. Compare that to Capitol Hill or Ballard or Fremont, where people are just out and about on foot, completing their errands without missing their car for the whole day. Meanwhile, the east side was built after the car, with wider streets, newer construction, more uniform architecture, and all that good old suburban DNA baked in. But the east side has its own appeal though. It has that cleaner, newer feeling, way easier to drive around. However, for that you trade off the character. The dense little neighborhoods where everyone walks to a corner coffee shop, this feeling of a place that's lived in, not just slept in. There are neighborhoods in Seattle that Seattle people would not call very walkable. An example is Magnolia, where I lived for 15 years. But it is actually way more walkable than most east side neighborhoods. So a lot of transplants pick wrong because they see the new construction, assume that means better, but it might for some people, but I'd use the word different rather than better. One more thing worth flagging is when Amazon went back to a 5-day office policy in January 2025, commute times in Seattle jumped 15 to 20% at peak hours almost overnight. In a normal city with parallel highways and grid streets, it's much easier to absorb that. In Seattle, it shows up right away and the whole system is running close to the edge. So the bridges and the ferries explain how Seattle physically works, but none of that explains why the city feels the way it feels when you live here. And that's where things get even weirder. All right, real quick, before we move on, if you're watching this thinking about a move to Seattle from out of state or you're already here, that's the exact thing I help relocators with every week. My contact info is in the description below. Reach out. We've helped over 900 families, almost 900 families, but we'll cross that mark pretty soon. So back to the lifestyle in Seattle. Let's talk about the Seattle freeze and tech dominance. You move to the city expecting that being friendly gets you friends, but in Seattle, you can be the warmest person in the room for 2 years and still feel like you're on the outside looking in. That is called the Seattle freeze. Almost every transplant runs into it. It sounds like a delicious flavor of ice cream or something, but the reality is very different. Don't take it personally if you ever experience it. They're not doing it to be mean. There's some structure to why it exists. The term first showed up in a Seattle Times article back in 2005, but people have noticed a pattern going back to the 1920s, World War II, and the 1980s tech boom. Every time Seattle grows fast, the freeze gets talked about more. What's funny is that only about 40% of King County residents were born in Washington. You'd think with that many transplants, the city would feel welcoming to all new arrivals. But the real question is, if everyone already here is a transplant and everyone coming in is a transplant, then who is causing the freeze? Well, there are some reasons that make sense when you look at them. Seattle attracts independent, introverted, outdoor-focused people who came here partly to have space, not necessarily to be around a bunch of people. The gray winters drive people inside, makes canceling plans easy, and people are already flaky these days, you know what I mean. So the Seattle freeze, the physical one, just gives them the last little push to stay home under the covers. On top of that, the tight little professional bubbles in the tech world don't mix much with the rest of the city. They don't have a lot of time to do that, honestly, so I don't blame them for having a social circle full of coworkers, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So the freeze is real, but it's easier to melt it than you think, which is not that different, honestly, from other cities. Get into outdoor stuff, hiking groups, climbing gyms, trail running clubs, you know, that sort of thing. Seattle's social culture responds to repeated low-key contact way better than aggressive meeting people at bars and parties. That's where real friendships form here. So stay with me on this, because in the wrap-up, I'll tell you the one mistake most transplants make about Seattle that turns a great city into a frustrating one. But let's finish this talk about the culture around here. Let's get into the other thing that defines Seattle's culture right now, and that's tech. The city is more economically dependent on a small number of tech employers than almost any other major American city. Amazon and Microsoft alone account for around 85%. That's right, you heard me. Two companies for around 85% of all Seattle area tech layoffs since 2023. And combined, they've cut over 46,000 employees in that window. You can see that rippling through the city. Meanwhile, Bellevue's office market is going the other way, with rents above $80 per square foot. Demand from AI companies pulling vacancy down 20%. That means the new AI money is choosing newer East Side buildings over older downtown Seattle stock. This is where AI gets interesting. It is a double-edged sword. In October 2025, Amazon announced its largest single layoff round ever, 14,000 corporate jobs, while at the same time they are injecting tons of money into AI investment. CNBC reported that around 55,000 layoffs in 2025 were tied directly to AI. Total job eliminations hit about 1.17 million, the highest since 2020. So if you're sitting in Seattle right now, you're seeing a lot of uncertainty. People aren't sure if the role is going to be there in a year, which shows up in housing demand and it shows up in the vibe of the city. One more thing to flag for anyone watching who runs a business: Seattle has a payroll tax called Jumpstart, which applies to big employers. In response, Amazon Possum Seattle Construction sifted thousands of employees to Bellevue. The tax setup is another reason that the gap between the two sides keeps widening. So that tech and tax pressure doesn't stay in office buildings, that's just for the professionals of the area. What it does bleed into is the housing market, and that's where Seattle starts doing things the rest of the country isn't. Pretty much every headline you've read around the national housing market over the last few years has been about one thing: the best cities are running on tight inventory. There's not enough new construction around the US to meet housing demand, and the prices are held up by this shortage. Well, Seattle's doing something different. We're not crashing, but we're not following a straightforward pattern either. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. The Zillow average home value in Seattle, the latest data as of April 2026, sits around $871,000, down about 2.5% year over year, with homes going pending though in about 8 days. Redfin shows a median sale price around $865, down about 1.6%, with homes selling in roughly 12 days. So depending on how you count, you're looking at medians in roughly the low to high 800s across the city. For single family homes specifically, that number is higher. Northwest MLS data put the Seattle single family median price right around $965K. That is the number most owner occupant buyers care about because that's what they're shopping for. Now, if you're looking at the east side, the gap is huge. Bellevue's median is up around 1.6 million. Kirkland, Redmond, Sammamish all hover between 1.2 and 1.6, depending on the week. That is roughly 600,000 more than the Seattle side for a comparable home. You're paying for newer construction, top-ranked schools, and east side tech proximity, and don't get me wrong, both sides can be the right one for different buyers. So here's where Seattle goes off script. Right now, the market is both at the same time. What do I mean by that? Well, Zillow shows about 29% of homes selling over list price with 8 days to pending. That is a sign of a hot seller's market. At the same time, 47% of homes are selling under list price. So you've got a market that's split. What that means in practice is that the well-located, well-priced, move-in ready single-family homes in walkable neighborhoods are still getting bidding wars. You've seen homes pull 20+ offers in a weekend. So strategy matters. Understanding the market, what works and what's hot and what's not, is critically important. So meanwhile, fixer-uppers, weird floor plans, and deferred maintenance properties are sitting for months and dragging the average days on market way up. King County total active listings are up about 35% year over year, but pending sales are down 6%. So even though the inventory is up, it's not the right kind of inventory. Let me say that again, it's not the right kind of inventory. Buyers are being picky about which ones are worth fighting for. Here's the part that goes against the national trend. Seattle and the Puget Sound region had one of the biggest multi-family building booms in the country in the early 2020s, a peak of over 10,000 new units in 2022, and that softened things up for a couple of years. But now the pipeline is collapsing. 2026 is projected to deliver only about 5,100 new units, less than half of 2025's deliveries and the lowest construction volume since 2013. Permits in the last year are down over 50% from the prior 3-year average, so supply is heading the wrong way over the next year or two. One more thing to know, and this is huge: if you're thinking about buying a fixer-upper in Seattle, a handyman runs around $100 to $200 an hour for most skilled work, and a licensed electrician can run anywhere from $200 to over $500 an hour depending on the scope. The Seattle-Tacoma Bellevue Metro has the 4th highest median electrician wage of any major metro in the country, and yes, that flips the math if you're buying a fixer-upper. So if you see a house that's $100K below comparable homes but needs a roof, electrical updates, and a kitchen, in this labor market, that discount disappears once the contractor invoices come in. You can easily go over that $100K. So if you know which side of this market you're shopping for, Seattle works. But if you don't, you'll either overbid on a house that wasn't ever going to move at list price, or you'll lose sleep and waste time writing so-so offers that never get accepted on the home everyone else wants. Strategy and a clear understanding of the market is critical when buying in Seattle, and that's what I'm here for. We will look at all the available options, find the home that fits your needs. In some cases, we'll have to get aggressive and bid well above the list price and waive contingencies. Don't worry, we're always doing an inspection of some form or another. Or we may negotiate hard against the seller, get you a huge price discount and a credit that covers your closing costs. It is all case by case, and it is not clear unless you have someone who's an expert by your side. Seattle rewards the people who understands that its rules are different, and it frustrates the ones who assume it works like everywhere else. So get that right, and the rest of the city opens up to you. If you're thinking about a move into the Seattle or Eastside market and you want a real area by area breakdown built around your life, not a generic neighborhood list, email me at hello@mwagnerteam.com. If you want to know which Seattle neighborhoods are about to get repriced by tens of billions in light rail, waterfront, airport, and life science investment, I've linked my breakdown of Seattle's insane mega projects right here. That's your next watch. All right, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.